Imagine waking to find your neighbor's house silent. No smoke from their chimney. No children playing in the street. By afternoon, you notice the telltale markings on their door, a red cross painted hastily, warning all to stay away. By evening, your own throat begins to burn. The swellings start before midnight. This wasn't imagination. This was reality for millions across medieval Europe. This was the plague that nearly erased human civilization from an entire continent. Before we descend into the nightmare, we need to understand what was lost. The early 1300s represented something extraordinary, a civilization at its zenith. This wasn't the dark ages of popular imagination. Medieval Europe was thriving in ways that would astonish modern observers. Climate itself had blessed this era. Historians call it the medieval warm period, decades of mild winters and abundant summers. Crops flourished. Populations exploded. Europe's population had grown to levels not seen since the height of Rome, reaching perhaps 75 million souls. Cities weren't just growing, they were transforming. Medieval urban centers burst beyond their old Roman boundaries. Milan, Paris, London, these weren't villages. They were sophisticated metropolises with populations exceeding 100,000. Narrow streets teemed with life. Merchants shouted their wares. Craftsmen hammered in workshops. Children darted between carts. Caravans moved continuously. Chinese silk reached Italian looms. Persian spices flavored English feasts. It was the first age of globalization. This interconnected world was humanity's greatest achievement. It was also about to become its greatest vulnerability. The same roads that carried prosperity were highways for devastation. Every ship, every cart, every trader was a potential carrier of apocalypse. 6,000 miles east of Paris, in the grasslands of Central Asia, something ancient stirred. This landscape of endless steppes, modern Kyrgyzstan and northern China, looks empty to human eyes. But beneath the grass, in vast underground colonies, lived millions of marmots and ground squirrels. They carried a passenger. Yersinia pestis, a bacterium that had evolved over millennia into a perfect killing machine. In these rodents, it lived in relative balance. They were reservoirs, not victims. The real danger came from the middleman, fleas. For generations, this deadly triangle, rodent, flea, bacterium, stayed in the remote steppes. Then the climate shifted. The 1330s brought severe droughts followed by devastating floods. Rodent populations crashed. Their fleas, desperate and starving, sought new hosts. When rodents encountered human trading posts, the fleas made a fateful leap. The first human victims appeared in isolated trading stations. They developed crushing headaches, violent fevers, and then the signature horror, swellings in the neck, armpits, and groin. These buboes, engorged lymph nodes fighting a losing battle, gave the disease its name, bubonic plague. They turned black, filled with blood and pus, and grew to the size of apples. Death came swiftly. 70% of those infected died within a week. But that wasn't even the worst form. In some victims, the bacteria reached the lungs, pneumonic plague. These sufferers coughed blood, spreading the infection through the air itself. Their mortality rate approached 100%. Whispers began reaching the Mediterranean by the early 1340s. Merchants arriving from the east spoke in hushed tones of entire regions falling silent. They spoke of cities in Persia where the living could not bury the dead. Of Indian provinces emptied. Of caravans found on the Silk Road with everyone dead, their cargo intact, their bodies rotting in the desert sun. Europeans heard these accounts with the detachment of distance. These were foreign lands, exotic peoples, perhaps being punished by God for their different faiths. The concept that microorganisms cause disease didn't exist. They had no understanding that invisible death was riding toward them on every ship, every bolt of silk, every shipment of grain. The story of how plague reached Europe centers on one city, Caffa. Today it's called Feodosia, a modest port in Crimea. In 1346, it was a jewel of the Mediterranean. A fortified Genoese colony controlling the crucial junction where Asian trade routes met European shipping lanes. Caffa's wealth made it a target. Khan Yani Beg of the Golden Horde, successors to Genghis Khan's empire, laid siege with a massive army. The Genoese, experienced in defense, settled in behind their formidable walls. The siege became a war of attrition. Months dragged on with neither side able to break the stalemate.
Help me! He's burning up! More pyres! We need more! Stay with me, brother!
Then the Mongol camps began to change. Soldiers started falling ill with crushing speed. The symptoms were unmistakable to those who'd seen them before: fever, swellings, death within days. The disease moved through the cramped military camps like wildfire through dry grass. Hundreds died daily. Then thousands. Yani Beg watched his army disintegrate. Defeat was certain, but not without revenge. The Khan made a decision that would echo through centuries. He ordered his engineers to load the plague-ridden corpses onto their trebuchets. Massive siege engines designed to hurl stones. Instead, they would hurl death itself.
Corpses! They're throwing corpses! It's a nightmare now! The sky is raining death!
For days, the sky above Caffa rained corpses. The defenders watched in horror as bodies crashed onto rooftops, smashed into squares, landed in water cisterns. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. But the biological impact would prove far worse. The bacteria don't care about host mortality. The fleas abandoning the cooling corpses cared only about finding warm blood. They found it in abundance among Caffa's panicked population. Within weeks, the unbreakable fortress was breaking from within. The Genoese merchants, pragmatic above all, recognized the end. They had one advantage: ships. 12 galleys prepared for departure, loading refugees, valuable cargo, and thousands of rats that had scurried aboard via the mooring lines. No one noticed the real passengers, plague-infected fleas riding on those rats. The ship slipped past the dying Mongol army and headed west. They stopped at Constantinople to resupply, seeding the infection in the Byzantine capital. They continued through the Aegean. Every port they touched became infected. The Mediterranean, that great highway of civilization, became a highway of death. October 1347. The Genoese galleys reached Messina in Sicily. Dockworkers rowing out to greet them encountered a vision of hell. Most sailors were dead, their corpses in advanced decomposition. The few survivors were delirious, covered in black, weeping sores. Messina's authorities acted quickly, expelling the ships from the harbor. But it was already too late. The rats had used the mooring ropes as bridges. Within days, people in the port district developed fevers. Within weeks, Messina was a city of the dead. The speed was paralyzing. Medieval medicine had no framework for understanding contagion at this scale. Doctors advised avoiding bathing, believing it opened pores to corrupted air. They recommended sweet-smelling herbs to counter the miasma. Some suggested breathing through sponges soaked in vinegar. None of it worked. Messina became a template for what would happen across Europe. The social order collapsed first. People fled to the countryside, spreading infection to every village they passed. Authorities tried quarantines, marking infected houses with crosses. Families were sealed inside to die together. By spring 1348, the great trading cities were falling like dominoes. Genoa, the very home of the death ships, was overwhelmed. Venice, the wealthy and proud queen of the Adriatic, faced extinction. The Venetians tried everything: prayer, quarantine, even early forms of contact tracing. Nothing slowed the onslaught. Venice's innovation was the lazaretto, quarantine islands in the lagoon where arriving ships had to wait 40 days before entering the city. This quarantine, from 40 giorni, 40 days, was revolutionary. But for the first wave, it came too late. The city lost perhaps half its population. From Italy's ports, the plague spread westward to Marseilles, northward to Barcelona, eastward to Dubrovnik. Every major port became an epicenter. And from these ports, the disease moved inland along rivers and roads, following trade routes with inexorable logic. When the plague reached Europe's great inland cities, it encountered perfect conditions for catastrophe. Paris, Florence, London, Barcelona, these weren't just large, they were dense. Multi-story timber buildings leaned over narrow alleys, blocking sunlight. Open sewers ran down street centers. Thousands lived packed together in conditions we'd consider unthinkable. Florence suffered particularly horrifically. This Renaissance jewel, this city of art and banking, lost up to 60% of its 120,000 inhabitants. The writer Giovanni Boccaccio witnessed it all. His accounts describe a city that stopped functioning as a human society. The terror of contagion destroyed the bonds that held civilization together. Boccaccio wrote of fathers abandoning dying children. Wives fled from husbands. The sick were locked in their homes and left to die. Servants refused to serve. Doctors refused to treat. The natural human impulse toward compassion was overwhelmed by the primal urge to survive. The machinery of urban life ground to a halt. Bakeries closed when bakers died. Courts stopped meeting when judges died. Construction on the great cathedral ceased when workers died. The sounds of a thriving city, hammering, shouting, cartwheels on cobblestones, fell silent. The only sound that remained was the constant tolling of church bells, marking death after death after death. Eventually, authorities banned the bells, partly because there was no one left to ring them, partly because the constant reminder was driving survivors mad. The dead accumulated faster than the living could manage. Churchyards filled within weeks. Cities dug massive plague pits, trenches where bodies were layered like cargo, sometimes 5 or 6 deep, covered with minimal soil. These pits became features of the landscape, visible for generations. London faced its own hell. The city's population of 70,000 dropped to perhaps 30,000. The Lord Mayor died. Most aldermen died. The Archbishop of Canterbury died. The Master of Trinity Hall at Cambridge died, along with most of his fellows. Oxford lost a third of its scholars. Entire professions nearly vanished. Doctors were particularly vulnerable. They had to examine the sick, lance the buboes, handle infected fluids. Most physicians who stayed at their posts died. The few who survived by fleeing faced social destruction, their cowardice remembered for generations. It was an impossible choice, duty or survival. Medieval Europeans lived in a world where the physical and spiritual were inseparable. Every event had divine meaning. A plague of this magnitude could only be interpreted one way: God was punishing humanity for its sins. Churches became packed with desperate worshippers. Processions wound through infected streets, thousands gathering to pray for deliverance. The tragic irony was that these mass gatherings, breathing the same air in enclosed spaces, spread the pneumonic form of plague even faster. Faith was accelerating death. When prayer failed, more extreme measures emerged. The flagellant movement swept northern Europe like wildfire. Bands of hundreds, sometimes thousands, marched from town to town dressed in identical robes. Twice daily, they performed public penance, stripping to the waist and whipping themselves bloody with leather scourges tipped with metal. They believed that by taking humanity's sins onto their own flesh, they could appease God's wrath. They created a spectacle of suffering wherever they went. Local authorities both feared and welcomed them. Their presence showed devotion, but their fanaticism threatened order. But as the death toll mounted beyond comprehension, some sought tangible scapegoats. A horrific conspiracy theory spread: Jews were poisoning Christian wells. Despite the obvious illogic, Jews died of plague at the same rates, the accusation provided what people desperately craved: someone to blame, someone to punish. Pope Clement VI issued bulls condemning this theory, pointing out that plague struck Jewish communities with equal fury, that it appeared in regions with no Jewish populations. Logic didn't matter. In Strasbourg, the entire Jewish community, 2,000 people, were burned alive in a wooden building. Similar massacres occurred in Mainz, Cologne, and across the Holy Roman Empire. The Black Death didn't just kill with bacteria. It revealed and unleashed the darkest capacities of human nature. The need to blame, to other, to destroy. Centuries of simmering prejudice erupted into genocidal violence. The plague killed millions with disease. Human fear and hatred killed thousands more. While cities dominated the historical accounts, 90% of medieval Europeans lived in the countryside. The plague reached them too, carried by fleeing city dwellers or traveling merchants. Rural devastation was slower but ultimately more profound. Entire villages vanished from existence. Modern archaeologists have found hundreds of lost medieval villages, sites where foundations remain but no historical record of what happened survives. The answer, almost always, is plague. Everyone died. No one remained to remember. The manorial system, the economic foundation of medieval life, collapsed. This system depended on peasant labor working the lord's land in exchange for protection. When half the peasants died, lords had fields but no one to work them. Harvests rotted. Grain stood unharvested. The food chain broke. Contemporary accounts describe surreal scenes. Livestock wandering freely through countryside after their owners died. Herds of sheep and cattle gone feral. Wolves, emboldened by lack of human presence, approaching villages in daylight. The carefully managed medieval agricultural landscape was reverting to wilderness. By 1350, the plague had reached Europe's furthest extremes. It struck Scotland's highlands, Scandinavia's fjords, even the remote Norse settlements of Greenland. These isolated colonies, already struggling, received the final blow. They disappeared entirely, not rediscovered until the 20th century. By 1351, the first wave of the Black Death burned itself out. The bacterium had simply exhausted its supply of easily reached victims.
Is it safe?
Survivors emerged from their homes cautiously, like people after a bombing, unsure if the danger had truly passed. What they found defied comprehension. Modern historians estimate that between 75 and 200 million people died across Eurasia and North Africa. Europe alone lost between 40 and 60% of its population, perhaps 50 million souls, in under 5 years. Entire generations were gone. The immediate aftermath was chaos. With so many dead, the survivors fought over property, goods, and position. But then something unexpected emerged from the devastation. For the first time in centuries, labor became more valuable than land. Peasants who had been legally bound to their lord's land suddenly had options. Lords desperate to get fields worked had to offer real wages, better conditions, even freedom from serfdom. The rigid hierarchy of medieval society, which had seemed eternal and God-ordained, cracked and in many places shattered. This wasn't universal or immediate. England's attempt to freeze wages through the Statute of Labourers led to the Peasants' Revolt of 1381. But the overall trend was irreversible. The plague had created what historians call the Golden Age of the Labourer, born from mass death, but real nonetheless. The psychological transformation went even deeper. Art became obsessed with death's inevitability. The Danse Macabre, Dance of Death, appeared in churches across Europe, showing skeletons leading kings, bishops, merchants, and peasants in a dance to the grave. Death, the great equalizer, respected no earthly rank. The plague destroyed the confidence of the High Middle Ages. The certainty that God protected the faithful, that the Church held answers, that civilization was progressing, all shattered. The world that rebuilt was more skeptical, more questioning, more willing to challenge authority. Some historians argue the Black Death was a necessary catalyst for the Renaissance. With traditional hierarchies weakened, with labor valuable, with old certainties destroyed, people had to think in new ways. The questioning mind of the Renaissance, the Protestant Reformation, even the scientific revolution, all trace roots to the shattering of the medieval worldview. The Black Death was the greatest trauma Western civilization ever endured. It proved that nature could destroy in years what humanity built over centuries. That invisible enemies could be more deadly than any army. That interconnection carried dangers as well as opportunities. The society that survived was fundamentally transformed, more cynical perhaps, but also more adaptable, more innovative, more resilient. For generations, this seemed like ancient history. A medieval nightmare that modern medicine had relegated to the past. Then came 2020. Lockdowns. Empty streets. Fear of the invisible. Economic collapse. The realization that our interconnected global civilization was vulnerable in ways we'd forgotten. The Black Death suddenly didn't seem so distant. History doesn't repeat, but it echoes. And some echoes carry warnings.
History isn't just the past, it's a mirror, and sometimes that mirror shows us ourselves. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and never forget the past has lessons for those willing to listen.